And then all of a sudden I see roof numbers and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to see that. And then I start seeing the inside of the safety barrier and I'm like, I'm really not supposed to see that. So I realize, it's too quick for me to process like what exactly is happening, but I know it's not normal. So I'm just like, all right, well, here we go. So another fun fact, I'm a private and seaplane pilot. From the time I was in 10th grade in high school to about my sophomore year of college, about 4 years, I worked at Joe Gibbs Racing. Started off in the fab shop as an intern, got hired on.
Well, guys, welcome back to the Pit Crew Podcast for episode number 21. Today, we got a special guest coming on here in one moment. That is going to be Myatt Snider, which is going to be awesome. This guy has won a NASCAR Xfinity Series race. He has been up front, especially last week, running good. Top 5 at one point. Got a top 10 at the end of the day, a cap off Martinsville for DGM in that number 91 car. Cameron, how you feeling, buddy? Back again for another episode. It's go time.
It is go time indeed. The last couple of weeks have actually been a little bit hectic around where I live. We've had to deal with some brush fires and everything like that, but thankfully that's all good to go now. It's still very dry up by me, but other than that, I'm excited to get this thing going. Let's bring in our special guest, Mr. Myatt Snider.
Myatt, welcome to the Pit Crew Podcast. How you feeling, buddy?
I'm doing awesome. It's really cool to be on. I've never been on a sponsor podcast before, but I think that's really cool, to be honest.
There's a first for everything. And that's the cool thing of DriveSmart, that we do got the content side of things kind of popping off here. So you just got a top 10 at Martinsville. Can you walk us through that day? I want to kick this off at Martinsville, then we're going to go into a deep, heavy dive into your career.
Yeah, Martinsville is always a crazy race, but especially so in the fall because, it's the cutoff race before the championship. So everybody's got just, they're the most desperate they've been all year to make something happen. So it's a lot of dodging stuff and a lot of, wreck avoidance. And so you gotta really stay on your toes and really have a good race car. But, luckily got to team up with DGM Racing and it was a ton of fun. And Mario brought a really great race car. And, Treetop was gracious enough to come on board to help sponsor us. And it was just really, really cool to do that and to go back to being, competitive in an Xfinity race. Martinsville is one of my favorite places. I've ran so many races there. I've come close to winning so many times there. So it was just really cool overall.
It was a fun race. It was fun watching you run up front. Got to the top 5 at one point, playing some strategy, held it up there. Spun out early and just recovered. Just made it a beautiful day all around. So let's dive into your racing career a little bit. How did you get into motorsports and where are you from?
So I am originally from Charlotte, North Carolina, one of the few. I don't meet too many people who are from here. But yeah, I grew up here. And because racing is so common here, I went to school with people who raced and, people I knew from around town raced. So it was just very, very common. And of course, my dad is Marty Snider. He is a pit road reporter. So I always got to see him on TV, always got to watch races because of that. And so eventually I just got into it as a bit of a hobby. About when I was 15 years old, I started taking it a little bit more seriously, started winning some races, started moving up, went to Legends cars at 16, late model stocks at 18. And then ARCA at 21 years old. So, and then eventually trucks and Xfinity. So I've won everything from the Myrtle Beach 400, which is a very prestigious late model stock race, to my debut race in ARCA at Toledo Speedway, even the Legends Nationals race at Atlanta Motor Speedway and the Short Track Nationals at Bristol Motor Speedway. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything throughout my motorsports career and, thankful to have done it all.
That's so awesome. I miss Myrtle Beach Speedway. Iconic track. That one was incredible. I mean, living in the Charlotte area, you go to Myrtle Beach. I go to Myrtle Beach every year. That's like the vacation spot, and it's cool always stop by the track. So that's always cool. So 2018, 2019, you ran for Thor Sport. Can you walk me a little bit through that and how that deal came together and what that did for your career?
Yeah, that was a really, really awesome deal for me because we didn't have, a ton of sponsorship, but Duke Thorson and Rhonda Thorson were willing to work with me to make it happen. And so, I came really close to winning very early on in my career there at Thor Sports. I think back to the Las Vegas race, that was the first intermediate we went to. And really, the previous year I had run a couple of races for KBM, and I ran, I think, 3 or 4 intermediates. It was Texas, Chicago, and Vegas and Kentucky. So yeah, about 4 intermediates. So I really didn't know like what to expect with those races. Obviously, and you get in a KBM truck, you're expected to win. So I was just kind of trying to learn and do as best I could. But so Vegas was literally my 5th intermediate race ever, and I'll never forget. But I passed Kyle Busch and Stuart Friesen 3 wide on the high side for the lead at one point, and I was like, okay, we got a pretty good truck today. So we were probably like 2nd to 3rd most of the race, had a ton of speed, and then it comes down to a green flag pit stop, and we get the right side tires changed. They wheel the old tires around the front of the truck, and I see the front changer go like this with the tire. He like sent it 3 stalls down, and of course we had an uncontrolled tire penalty. So that kind of ruined that race. But it was really cool to be like that competitive right off the bat. But yeah, I had a ton of fun at ThorSport. Really great group of people. And they've somehow done what most race teams think is impossible, and they're succeeding very far away from the central hub of racing. But always enjoyed my time there. Won Rookie of the Year that year. Didn't end up winning a race, but just got really, really close many times. So, but it was a lot of fun memories there.
Then you got the ultimate opportunity where 2020 comes along. You get the deal with RCR. How did that come together? Because that was a big jump from ThorSport to full-time at Xfinity with Richard Childress Racing. Iconic team. I mean, you think back, Kevin Harvick, Dale Earnhardt, all these names, all this history. How was your experience at RCR, and how did that deal come together?
Yeah, so we actually ran one race in 2019 with Tax Slayer. That was their first race after not sponsoring a race car for a couple of years, I believe. And they were like, we want more. We're ready to do more. So they moved on to 8 races. And, we made one start with Ryan Sieg Racing, or RSS Racing, which is Ryan Sieg's team, before the pandemic started. So I technically had I had completed all the starts that were necessary before everything kind of shut down. So we're just kind of sitting there during the pandemic, like a couple of weeks in, and we're just like, hey, we have our other sponsors, right? Like TaxSlayer is putting in a good investment, but it's only I think 8 races. So why not see like if we can put together a deal with RSS Racing to run the rest of the season? And thankfully they agreed, and that ended up being one of the best seasons of my career. I led a career high amount of laps that season, and very nearly won Pocono in the RCR car, and even more interestingly enough, very nearly won Miami in the Sieg car. So it was one of those weird COVID races where things were kind of a little bit different. So what ended up happening is we were kind of like 13th to 14th all day. And I was kind of racing around the 11 of Justin Haley and the 21 of Anthony Alfredo most of the day, and as well as Jeremy Clements. And it comes down to there's a caution with 10 to go. And we had managed to save a set of tires, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're perfect. So we ended up being, a lap down, just barely. And we were the first car on the lead lap. And so we were like, we're taking tires. We're going to be ahead of everybody. Like, we have actually a real shot to win this. But then for some reason, they called the 21 the lucky dog. So I've always been confused by that, because I went and looked back at it, and he was for sure behind us on the racetrack. But he somehow got the lucky dog. So we're just kind of sitting there a lap down with fresh tires when nobody else has it. And we're just like, okay, well, I guess we'll just vibe for 3 laps. But thankfully got the because there was no qualifying, we got the inverts and started on the pole the next day and actually led a lap. So that was really cool, and that's where I learned to love Homestead Miami Speedway, and obviously I won there the next year.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm going to dive into next. So you do got a pole in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I believe that came at Daytona, which is just super cool to start the season off with that. That must have had you hyped up, feeling good going into Daytona, and then later on you did get the win at Homestead, Miami. Can you walk me through that day and what that meant to you? Because growing up in the Charlotte area, you know, your family's in racing. I would imagine winning at one of the top divisions in NASCAR is a dream come true. It must have meant an awful lot to you.
Yeah, for sure. It was honestly one of the coolest wins of my whole career because for me, like whenever I went to Homestead in trucks, like it was a real big struggle. And since then, I've learned that trucks really just aren't meant to drive up against the wall. So I was always trying to figure out like, how do I drive up against the fence? And then now I know that you don't really do that in trucks. But Xfinity, I had never really tried it. So I went, the only goal I ever had with the 2020 races in Homestead was just to go there and figure out how to drive onto the fence. So I didn't care if I, you know, destroyed my race car. I was going to figure it out as best I could and try to get as many reps doing it as I possibly could. And so I was able to apply that, and you know, the pit strategy worked out for us to kind of stay out and run long in the 2021 race. So we drove all the way up to third. Caution comes out with like 6 to go. Come in, get tires, get out to the lead, and then, you know, I kind of fumbled it a little bit, lost the lead, but still was second. So I was like, I got to do this better. I got to try a little bit harder. Got to keep the wheels under me. And so I did. And, you know, I got out of the launch, the Geico restart zone really well. Got up to Tyler Reddick's left rear quarter panel, drug him back, and then just dug really hard through 1 and 2. And then I look in my mirror off 2, and I see there's like 10 car lengths between me and the next guy. I'm like, holy hell, I think I might actually have a shot at this. And so just did my best to hold on to it and ended up winning the race. So, and it was really, really cool. I literally carried the trophy all the way from Miami to my house.
That is so awesome. I mean, thinking back on the guys you were racing that day, Tyler Reddick, I mean, and what all he has done, you went out and beat these guys very early into your career. That must have meant an awful lot and such a cool deal. So we had a Daytona the following year. You're in the 31 car. You took a hit. My gosh. Watching that on TV, we were scared for you, buddy. That was rough. I mean, just how the car turned around and just caught the air. Do you, like, what do you remember from that crash? It was such a scary moment.
Yeah, a lot happened in a very short amount of time, obviously. So we had honestly been pretty stout all day. Like that was one of the OG Jordan Anderson Racing chassis, and it was really, really good. Like it was a good speedway car. We had an issue in qualifying that day, and that ended up like relegating us to like starting 33rd or something like that. And so for some reason, Jeremy Clements and Sam Mayer and I were back there kind of all around the same spot. And I told Sam and Jeremy, like, hey, I'm going to the front. I don't care how I got to do it, but I don't want to be back here to start the race. So I literally just planted my car on the high side, and Jeremy went with me. Sam did not. And so lap 1, we were 33rd. By lap 7, we were 5th. So ended up working out for me to get up there. So we had like a stout car all day, and we were kind of up in the mix. And, you know, coming down to the wire towards the end of the race, white flag lap, we were probably going to realistically end up somewhere about 5th. So I come off of 2. I've got a hell of a push by Alfredo. And we've got an opening to the bottom, and I'm just taking it because I'm not going to slow down for any reason. And so I swerve to the bottom. I have to straighten back up, so I give it a little bit of right wheel, and at that exact moment, Alfredo gives me this huge shove again, and that just kind of causes the car to whip right around. And next thing I know, I'm looking at the hood of somebody else, and I'm like, man, I that sucks. Like, we're going to have a pretty good finish, and now we got a wrecked race car. And then all of a sudden, I see roof numbers, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not supposed to see that. And then I start seeing the inside of the safety barrier, and I'm like, I'm really not supposed to see that. So I realize, you know, it's too quick for me to process like what exactly is happening, but I know it's not normal. So I'm just like, all right, well, here we go. And then all of a sudden, you know, I feel the car dig into the fence, and I'm like sucked into the left side of my seat. And I had 3 distinct hits on the fence of 75, 50, and 25 Gs respectively. So they're all pretty quick and big hits. So then I land back down, and like any good race car driver does, I grab the steering wheel to try and steer it back straight. The only problem is there's no wheels on it, so I'm steering nothing. But I'm sliding to a stop, and I look, I kind of notice that there's, kind of sparks all around, and I come to a stop, and I look to my right, and I see grass where the transmission tunnel was, and I'm like, okay, that's not supposed to be there. The transmission's gone. And then I get out of the car, and I'm like, the motor's gone. And I look back, and I'm like, the fuel cell's hanging on the ground. I'm like, oh, I just hit really big. But yeah, it was really crazy. And the fact that, so many parts went flying everywhere. My truck arm went through the side of JJ Yaley's car and ended up sticking out the back of his trunk. Funny enough, a piece of my splitter ended up being lodged in, I think, one of Mario's cars, and then Matt Mills hit my engine. So it was a lot happened in about 5 seconds.
Oh my gosh. I mean, when you break it down like that, you see it on video, then you get the full breakdown. So the safety workers get over there. Are they like panicked at all, or are they just like another day on the job, another car went flying into the catch fence, not a big deal?
Well, the thing is with us, we have a signal to the safety workers that we're okay, right? Like if I drop the window net, that means I'm good. Like I've got all my facilities about me. So I dropped the window net. My foot was a little sore, but there was still a ton of adrenaline rushing, so I didn't really feel it. As soon as I got back to the care center, I'm like, okay, it's actually like pretty sore. So it got banged up pretty good. But I was still able to drive the very next week at California. So that was pretty big. And I don't know why, but like the first third of the season with Jordan Anderson, like we just had every single thing possible go wrong that could go wrong. But we had a ton of speed. Like we went to California and we were like probably going to finish top 10 there, and then blew a tire with like 10 to go or something like that. And I'm just like, man, like I love this place. But it just, yeah. So it was really interesting the way everything happened. But yeah, thankfully I made it out of it.
It's crazy how much like raw talent you have, because you didn't get as many years as some of these other guys get in Xfinity to start winning races, and you just instantly shot up there and just started winning, running up front every single week. So after this, the JGR deal comes along. Treetop, loyal sponsor to you, enters your career over at Joe Gibbs Racing. At Joe Gibbs, you got 5th at Daytona, 6th at Portland. I believe you led laps at Portland. Can you walk me through your season at JGR?
Yeah, so I don't know if you know this, but I actually, from the time I was in 10th grade in high school to about my sophomore year at college, so about 4 years, I worked at Joe Gibbs Racing. Started off in the fab shop as an intern, got hired on, then worked, kind of building and tearing down the 20 car for Matt Kenseth when he was there. And then transitioned, they changed the way that things worked so that they had like people who just built the cars and people who just tore them down. So I ended up going on the team that tore down the cars. So yeah, that was really cool, and I got to learn personally, how much work and attention to detail goes into these cars and how much effort there is. So it was kind of a thing that I had always wanted to do, was to go to JGR and just, see what it was like, make a few starts with them and, see how good their race cars are. And yeah, it was really, really awesome. Obviously got a really good finish at Daytona, survived the chaos. Got 6th at Portland, really should have had a 5th place finish, but got moved on the last lap for no reason. And yeah, we had speed for the rest of the year. And I really kind of learned, what it's like to drive a really fast race car at some of these racetracks. I've had, I've kind of a mixed bag of cars throughout my whole career. And so seeing, what a JGR car was like was really enlightening, especially at a place like Martinsville. And I feel like that's kind of helped me to be a better driver there and know what a car needs to go faster on there. So it was really cool. And I got to work with Jason Ratcliffe, who ironically was the crew chief when I was working at JGR. So just really cool all around the whole JGR tour for me.
That's awesome. And then obviously the relationship of Treetop carried over to DGM. How did that deal come together here for Martinsville? I mean, I know a bit of the situation with DGM, and the 91 car became open, and how did them conversations get rolling to put you in the car at Martinsville? Because obviously we got a very good result with it.
Yeah, so essentially, we were going to do some more races with Treetop this year, but some unexpected events happened with them where they couldn't really commit to the first probably 3/4 of the year, which they really wanted to, but they were unable to, just for unforeseen circumstances. So, the earlier part of the year, I was just kind of leaning on, okay, I've got Superior Essex, a longtime sponsor, does data cables. They came on for a race at Martinsville earlier this year. Then, I found a last minute deal to go run Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and that was really good. So finally, Treetop was able to commit to a race at Martinsville, and I was actually going to originally take it to the team I had been running with SS Greenlight, but they ended up selling it before before we could put it all together. So I kind of asked around, was trying to see who had availability, and luckily Mario did. And I'm kind of so glad that it happened exactly that way because, working with Mario and the whole DGM team, the Goslin family, was just a real treat. Like, absolutely class act people, true family operation, and just professional folks all the way around. So I had a lot of fun. I enjoy working with small teams because it's a more kind of family environment, and DGM definitely really kind of encompasses that.
Well, we loved having you this past weekend. I hope we can work with you again. I'm going to pass you over to Cameron Romano and see what questions he has for you.
Hey, so I kind of did a little bit of a stat research before the show, and I noticed you've ran the Wheel and Euro Series back in 2019, and you even ran the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge. How were those two series for you when you ran them?
Yeah, so when I was at ThorSport, I was sort of kind of in the Ford development camp. And so as a result, what they usually do is they'll just throw their development guys in with Multimatic for a race. And thankfully that was Sebring, and that was honestly really cool. Like, I had always seen Sebring on TV. Like, I grew up a road course racing fan. Like, I love Formula One and the American Le Mans series before I ever loved NASCAR. So to get to run at a place like Sebring was just really, really awesome. And it kind of suited my driving style, a high wear, really rough place. I had a lot of fun running there. So that was kind of a thank you gesture, and we're trying to help you out gesture from Ford. So I appreciated that at the time. And then the NASCAR Euro Series was a bit of a unique deal. So just due to the nature of the deal with me at ThorSport, I kind of found out really late in the game, that I wasn't going to run for them full time. And so it was unfortunate the way it kind of panned out, but we had to kind of figure something out with what we had. And, a lot of our deals were kind of dependent on working with ThorSport. So a lot of those kind of ramped down a bunch with the funding that we had. So we had to take it to somewhere that was going to, not only improve my skill, but, kind of be, kind of have some notoriety. Right. And so, thankfully, I talked with a guy named Jerome Galpin in Daytona about it, and he's the director of the NASCAR Euro Series. And he's like, well, come run with us. Like, we've got some of the best competitors in Europe, and it's still stock car racing, so you could become a much better road course racer. I'm like, okay, well, I'll check it out. And so I did a test at private track in France to kind of get my bearings and figure out how the cars were, and liked it. And it was a lot of fun. And I honestly had a ton of fun racing in Europe. Getting to see the sights and scenes in Europe while getting to drive race cars was just honestly a real, real treat. And, the formula works right now. Ryan Vargas is doing it. He's, he lives at my house, and he's driving in Europe in the NASCAR Euro Series with his sponsors, and they're loving it. So it's a cool little deal.
Nice. Would we see any more starts in the Euro Series in the near future?
I don't know about the near future, just because my sponsors are, they're kind of committed to the Xfinity Series right now. But, kind of like I also talked with Bobby Labonte. He kind of tried to convinced me to do that. He's kind of a family friend of ours, to go to the Euro Series. And so he did it as kind of like a retirement tour thing, right? Like he did the Whelen Euro Series first, and then he did some modified racing afterwards. So I could foresee that for sure, like just going and have some fun, doing some Euro races, retirement tour. But for now, Xfinity.
Gotcha. I think that's all I have for right now. I'm gonna pass it back to DLBTV, and we'll go from there.
So you just said Vargas lives at your house. Is that right?
Yes, he is. We are technically roommates. So he's been there since the beginning, really. I bought my house back in just like a week before the pandemic started. And I think he moved in like a month later. So he's been there a while. And thankfully we haven't, beat each other up yet. But seriously, he's a good roommate.
That's awesome, because we actually had Ryan on the podcast way far back, and he's done some work with us
Really?
when we did a iRacing competition last December, and he got to help out with that, and he was a part of the streams then, and then he came on our podcast later on. So I just thought that was super cool. Vargas is such a cool guy. I'm sure he's traveling so much this year, but obviously winning a race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, it's every kid's dream. What advice would you give a young racer or a younger race fan that wants to get into motorsports, wants to go the NASCAR route and end up in your position that you're in now?
Yeah, the biggest pieces of advice I can give is find any way. The biggest thing is just find any way to exist in this sport that you can, right? Like, not everybody is gonna, come from a rich family or have good connections. So the best thing you can do is to get in the sport somehow and make connections, right? So like, while I've been having these last couple seasons where I haven't had nearly as much funding as I've had before, I've been, working with NASCAR and NBC to do a role of pit spotting, and that basically keeps me around for every single race weekend for the second half of the year. So, and I've thankfully I've made some connections on the TV side, and so I might be around even if I don't have any deals for next year. I still will probably be around for every single race weekend just because I've made some connections in the TV world. So that's just staying relevant and staying in the sport however you can, whether it's driving or not, is one of the most important things you can do. The other most important thing you can do is just network, right? Like, and brand yourself. Like you've got to make connections. You never know who might, make that difference for you. You never know who might know somebody who can actually fund you for a year or many years of your career. So the best thing you can do is just make as many connections as possible, be as personable as possible, and just be a good human. And then make sure that people know that you exist outside the racetrack. Having a big presence as best you can is becoming more and more important. And a lot of people are starting to put their presence online, and that just helps them.
Sponsorship is everything in NASCAR. When we had a conversation with Josh Bilicki, he said that he's like nonstop emailing company after company after company. Is that what you got to do to keep a ride in NASCAR? Is this nonstop knock on doors until somebody answers?
Yes, absolutely. And I've been blessed throughout my career to have a lot of really good sponsors who have helped me to be full time, without me having to reach out to too many folks. I've had a couple of really big and loyal sponsors. That unfortunately that has changed last couple of years, not due to them not wanting to sponsor me, but just due to the reality of the circumstances that we're currently in. And so, so I've had to kind of, not necessarily reinvent myself, but kind of reform how I approach racing, right? So I've been reaching out to more and more sponsors and, trying to get into that game and do my best to pitch myself. And it's been hard. You do get a not even no's, but just non-replies, right? Like people just not even either reading your email or reading their email and not even replying. So that can get frustrating at times because you put in all this effort to make a customized pitch and, you know, you brand yourself exactly in a certain way, and some people just don't pay attention to it. But that's just the nature of the game, right? So you got to have a lot of perseverance, and I think that's probably one of the other important factors is just to persevere. Like a lot of people, you know, they'll get to a hard time and then they'll maybe try for a year, or they won't even try at all and they'll just give up. So it's so important to just push through it all and keep trying.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, it's sponsorship is everything, and obviously next year nothing's set in stone for your plans for next year, but will we see you in the NASCAR Xfinity Series doing any races come 2025?
I don't have anything signed right now, but I do think I'm in a much better position than I was entering into this year. Like entering into this year, I didn't even know if I was going to race at all. You know, I had a feeling that I might be able to put together one race, but from all I knew from, you know, February onwards, I wasn't going to have anything like set in stone. So I had to really go about trying to find that. And thankfully it has panned out, and a lot of my sponsors are, you know, starting to, you know, kind of come back and starting to commit more. And so thankfully that's, or at least saying they want to commit more. So I think that's, you know, that's boding well for next year. It's definitely better than I was entering in this year. So I don't have anything signed for right now, but it's definitely looking up. Things are looking up.
I think you're one of them drivers where if you just got given a solid opportunity, you're going to kill it and go into like contend for championships. I mean, you killed it at the beginning of your career, but you got thrown in so quickly versus some of these guys that have gotten years and years and years of experience, and you got thrown in quickly and succeeded. But your performance at Martinsville just showed me it doesn't matter if it's DGM equipment or you get another opportunity at Gibbs. I think you're going to go out and contend for wins. I think you got a bright future ahead of you if that door just opens up, and I'm sure it will over time because it seems like you are working very hard for these positions to open. So when we were at Martinsville, as you said, DGM is a bit of a family team. We got some downtime, and everyone tried jacking up the car. I got a pretty funny video on my Instagram where I failed at it miserably. You jacked that thing up perfectly. Have you ever thought about being a jack man?
Perfectly is putting it a little too nicely.
I was surprised. Have you got experience being a jack man?
No, but I've definitely not with like a pit jack. It still took me quite a few attempts to get it up, but yeah, I mean, I worked on race cars for many years, and tried to work on my own late models when I had the opportunity to, and so I'm no fool around a jack, but yeah, definitely not meant for a pit jack.
Yeah, I was trying to jack it up. I got told just put my body weight on it. It did nothing. So definitely wasn't a good attempt for me. But I'm going to toss you back over our camera, and I think he's going to ask you about your Championship 4 picks here and see what we got going in the Phoenix.
Yeah. Last race weekend of the year. I just want to know who your Championship 4 picks are for the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series.
Yeah. So Cup Series, I feel like, and I'd have to look back to the data, but I feel like, of all the guys who it's likely to be, I feel like Tyler Reddick is probably the most clutch out of any of the drivers. Like he can hold it together in a situation when it really matters. You saw that in all of his Xfinity starts. He funny enough, in his 2 Xfinity seasons, the first season he only won the first and the last race, which won him the championship. But he obviously clutched up when he needed to. And then in his second championship season, he rode the wall better than anybody else and won it that way. Like he won it straight up. So he's able to really put it together when the time comes, when the time calls for it. So I think he's going to be probably the one to watch. And I'm proud to call him a friend of mine. So we used to work out together a ton, and I think he's got the skills to do it. So Xfinity, let's see, we've got Allmendinger, the 21,
Custer,
and
Austin Hill. Wait, Austin Hill is Custer. I'd have to look at it. But I mean, we got a pretty stat lineup. I
Allgaier.
personally think, yeah, Allgaier.
All guy. Yep.
So I actually talked with AJ Martinsville weekend, and he was feeling pretty good, but he knows that, you know, the pretty much the whole campus that welcomes history and Xfinity is kind of touchy at best. So, and I remember vividly, I think it was 22 when he was also in the championship for at Phoenix. They weren't the greatest there. So, I don't know how good either him or the 21 will be. And obviously, Phoenix is one of Allgaier's best tracks. He was within 4 laps of winning there earlier this year, and Custer was really good there in the championship race last year. So I think it's going to come down to either Justin or Cole Custer. We'll see. I think some stuff could come into play. I mean, I think Cole didn't really make a lot of friends at Martinsville, and they don't have those not friends don't have anything to lose going into Phoenix. So it could be Allgaier's year. It's just going to depend on, if they can keep it together for the whole race, no blown tires or anything like that. So, but I think, him and Jim Pullman are probably one of the 2 most capable duos in Xfinity. So yeah, my pick is Allgaier.
And then trucks, we got Grant Enfinger, Christian Eckes, and Ty Majeski and Corey Helm that's going to race it out.
Yeah. From the heart, I really hope that Grant Enfinger wins, because I also consider Grant Enfinger a friend. We were teammates at ThorSport. I work with one of his managers pretty closely because he handles Superior Essex, John Loper. And, I just consider them close friends, and I really want to see them win. But I do know that it's going to be pretty hard to beat Corey Heim, because Scott Zipadelli, his crew chief, is probably the most successful outside of Rudy Fugle crew chiefs in the truck series, period. And obviously Corey is a fantastic driver, so I think that they're probably the favorites for the championship. But Grant is one of those clutch drivers who is always in contention and always finds a way to put himself in the right place at the right time. So it's going to probably come down to, I feel like, Corey Heim or Grant Enfinger.
All right. So we have our official DriveSmart Championship 4 picks. My next question, obviously, final race weekend of the year. Do you have any plans for the off season? Are you just going to relax for a little bit, or are we just going to start working on possible rides for next season?
Yeah, a lot of plans, actually. So, of course, I'll be reaching out to sponsors as often as I can, both new and old. Just trying to see what they might have and find any new prospects. So that's probably going to be my number one priority. I'm also, another fun fact, I'm a private and seaplane pilot. I got my private pilot's license last year, my seaplane pilot's license this year. So I'm going to start doing a little bit of training for that on the side when I have time. Probably getting my instrument rating and hopefully trying to complete that sometime around summer next year. And on a personal level, my girlfriend is from Detroit, Michigan. So me and a couple of buddies of mine in racing. One of them is his dad's from Detroit, and he's a fan of Detroit sports. So, and the other guy is from Philadelphia. So we're going to take a big road trip in December, early in December, where we're driving to Philly on a Thursday to catch a Philadelphia Flyers game, and then driving to Detroit the morning after, and then I think we're going to catch a Red Wings game that weekend. So very busy road trip. I do enjoy seeing Detroit in the wintertime because it's snow is cool, and it's always fun seeing her family in wintertime. So yeah, so I'll be busy.
All right. Obviously keeping busy is always a good thing. My final question before I pass it back to DLB. You mentioned earlier in the show that Martinsville is one of your favorite tracks to race. What is your least favorite track to race?
Oh man. Um, I don't. I try and keep a philosophy of I don't hate any racetracks, but I definitely have some racetracks that might hate me. So whether that's I always have bad luck there, or I just kind of can't get a feel on it. So Dover is one of them. Uh, I've always enjoyed driving around there, but I've never felt like I can tell what the race car is doing, right? Like it's weird because I love Bristol, which I feel like is very similar, just it's like half the size. Um, and there I've always felt like I've had a ton of speed, but for some reason Dover I've just always kind of struggled to feel where the car is at and knowing exactly what level of grip I have. What else? That's really it. Dover is the one that sticks out in my mind the most. There's definitely a couple racetracks where I've just had zero luck. But overall, I think Dover's probably the worst for me.
That's totally fair. Obviously, all these tracks have different, I guess, different technicality levels, so to speak. Dover is a very tough track. I'm a little bit hurt by that statement because I love going to Dover. um,
Oh, I love
but
going there. I just don't
oh
think it
yeah,
loves me going there.
don't worry. I think Miles the Monster is gonna look down and probably in your favor next year if you decide to run. You never know. All right. On that note, I'm gonna pass it back to DLB and see if he has any final questions.
Absolutely. Two more final questions here. First one is obviously sim work, whether if that's with Chevrolet or Toyota or any manufacturer, is obviously very important. And if not that, simulator like iRacing, how has that helped you with your racing career?
Yeah, well, so I'm probably one of the handful of drivers that's seen all three manufacturer simulators. It's been a while since I've seen the Ford one, but obviously I saw the Toyota one last year and I saw the Chevy one as recently as 2022. So kind of got a good perspective on all of them and how effective they are. And for like driving purposes, the manufacturer sim is the best way to go just because, it takes into account kind of everything, right? From handling dynamics to how the parts interact with the car. Like it's the most realistic you're ever going to get, but it still takes a lot of work, right? Like when I was at Jordan Anderson Racing, it took us until August at Michigan to really get a feel on like, okay, this is exactly real life right here. But it took a lot of attempts. So, but yeah, it's when it's in tune, it can really, really help you because it can tell you exactly where your markers are. It can tell you where, a car is going to get loose or tight or whatever. So yeah, that's a big thing that's really helped me out a bunch. Now I will use iRacing as much as I can, just because it's helpful for like getting in a rhythm, right? Like knowing where the markers are on the racetrack, getting into a racing groove, and just kind of practicing your technique, right? So that's still something that's really important to practice. I don't think it's as realistic on the handling part, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be exactly perfect, and I think it's probably like 85% the way there.
Absolutely, that's super cool. I mean, it's crazy how top secret them things are because we never get to see very much of them, but a lot of the drivers obviously go and use them, and crazy cool to hear the stories about the manufacturer simulators. So my final question is, what's your favorite motorsport memory? Either on track, off track, growing up and racing. Is there a moment or memory that sticks out, whether if that's your win in the NASCAR Xfinity Series or what it may be? Is there a moment that sticks out that just is your favorite memory and moment from racing?
It's so hard to pick just one, man. But I'll like, 'cause I've won kind of from every level and I've won a lot of prestigious races. So I think the one that probably stands out the most for me is kind of the aftermath of the Miami victory, right? Because it was still kind of COVID, but not quite, right? Like we were allowed to be around each other, but like, um, but people weren't really coming to the racetrack for funsies much because I don't think you're really allowed. So, so I obviously, like I said, I carried the trophy all the way back from Miami to my house, and we were actually, for some reason, when we were landing, because the flights land in Statesville, North Carolina, right? It's a town that's like about an hour north of Charlotte. There was too much fog for us to actually land in Statesville, so we had to land in Greensboro, I believe. So I fell asleep on the way there, or on the way home, and I wake up and I text my girlfriend. I'm like, "Hey, I just landed," and she texted me back to like in Statesville. I'm like, "Yeah," because I hadn't noticed yet. So like, I'm kind of getting my bearings about me waking up, and I look out the window and I'm like, this does not look like the Statesville airport. And she's like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Maybe?" ? And she's like, "Yeah, I think you landed in Greensboro." And I'm like, so I pull up my GPS and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I did land in Greensboro." So that was odd. So I had to wait because my truck was at the Statesville airport. I had to wait for my parents to actually come pick me up. Turns out they were planning a surprise party for me at my house, and I didn't know it yet. So they come pick me up, drop me off at the airport to go get my truck, and I drive home. All the lights are off. I walk in the house, and then all of a sudden, all the lights come on. But like a bunch of my friends are there. Folks I hadn't seen in a couple of years were there. It was just really, really cool and a nice gesture. And they even got me a couple bottles of champagne to spray everywhere. So that was fun. Celebrated on the front porch of my house around like 2:30 in the morning, despite the fact that we landed around midnight. So it was a whole fiasco getting back, but it was a really memorable night.
That's so cool. I mean, that's so cool to have a surprise party for winning your first ever NASCAR event. So big. I'm sure that meant a lot to you. So before we send you off here, where can the people find you on social media? And if there's any sponsors you want to thank, go right ahead.
Yeah, so all of my social handles are at Myatt Snider. I think the only exception is Instagram, where it's at Myatt_Snider. Got to thank Treetop for their support, just because they've supported me so much for 3 years now. Got to thank Superior Essex for their support earlier this year. Obviously, got to thank DriveSmart for their support as an associate. Clarence's Steakhouse for their support at Martinsville. That was really cool. They're a long-time late model stock sponsor, so it was cool to see them on an Xfinity car for a Martinsville race. And Night Fire Protection, of course. They came on last minute and bought a set of tires for us. So really cool stuff. Thankful for you guys for putting this on. It's a really cool show, and yeah, thank you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on and being a part of the Pit Crew podcast for episode number 21. So Cameron, as we close out here, obviously, fun interview there. A lot of really cool stories, a lot of really cool moments. Any takeaways you have there from Myatt Snider?
The man can drive.
I agree. Heck of a talent. Just waiting on that big opportunity, and this guy's going to go win a Xfinity Championship. I'm calling it now. But I appreciate
calling
everyone.
it right now.
Absolutely. I appreciate everyone for tuning in here tonight as we're going to close it out on the Pit Crew podcast. We'll be back here. If not next week, it'll be the week afterwards. And I appreciate you all for tuning in to the Pit Crew podcast for episode number 21. Everyone have a nice, safe week. It's Phoenix weekend, championship weekend. Time to get after it.